That's recording.
Okay. So, question number 1. In what way did your previous knowledge and or experiences influence your perspective on the issues raised by this documentary film? Indicate the specific nature of your previous knowledge, / experiences, and your answers. So what's your first?
Hello? I don't know. Part of my thing was like, like I come from like a perspective that's like really understanding of deaf people and like deaf culture. Like I've taken classes like studying it, and I've like grown up signing. So for me, it was very much like but I also like identified with the like hearing perspective. So for me, it was kind of hard to listen because I felt kind of like in the middle, and like both of them were super extreme polar opposites, and I couldn't kind of handle it. I was like, but you're not listening to each other. But you're not listening to each other. I don't know. Where was the happy medium?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I identify more with, being the hearing side of it, but I've only taken one, ASL class, but being friends with Abby, like I've learned a lot more about like deaf and deaf culture. And so I could kind of see both perspectives. So it was really hard hearing how extreme both sides were. I felt like you were saying, I felt like there needed to be a middle ground. So it's kind of hard to wrestle with that.
Yeah, especially with the hearing perspective, like I'm not a mother yet, and so I hear and I don't know what it's like to have a deaf child, and so that's always going to be something new. Like I can have a deaf friend or a deaf professor, and I'm kind of distanced from that, but having a deaf child is a whole new ball game. So okay.
I think if just even with the like little knowledge of like ASL and like being in like speech pathology classes at Baylor, that's just imagining myself watching this film like in high school as to now. I think I'm more sympathetic to the deaf culture now than I would have been in high school, not understanding any of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, how would you characterize the Artinian family in general, regardless of hearing status? Comment on family dynamics and relationships.
This family was like #dysfunctional. I don't know like how else to say it, but it was so crazy because okay, I mean like I like can definitely see how like parents like the grandparents could be like more like towards the hearing perspective, but I have a hard time understanding like how having a son who like grew up deaf and grew up signing, they could suddenly feel so intense about it that they would like push away their child because they were refused to like really listen to his perspective, and like I think that like he also did like the son did like a bad job of like being understanding to like the hearing perspective, but I just I couldn't imagine like how a family could like kind of like let it get to that intense point where they like couldn't reconcile their views, and I just like I don't know, like my family's really close, and so for me that was like a really hard thing to think about, because I think even if like my family fought, like at the end of the day like we would be like back together, and like we would like find a way to figure it out and like find a happy medium or something that like all of us could respect,
Yeah.
like for me it's like
I feel like I would describe their family as very vocal about how they feel, and not always in a great way. Vocal without listening or like trying to come to an understanding. Like I feel like both sides were just trying to say what they wanted to say and not listening to others, so then they got more frustrated with each other until it was like we're gonna kind of separate ourselves. So I felt it was very extreme watching it the whole time, so it made it really hard. But yeah.
They were definitely very honest.
Yeah.
It was chaotic.
Yeah. Extreme and dramatic and emotional. I'd like to think some of that was due to editing and administration.
Didn't you also mention how some of the translation was like extreme?
Some of the interpreting, FYI, some of the interpreting wasn't quite
I
right.
paused. I like turned off the sound. I was like, I can't do this.
Because they were like adding in more of like an anti-hearing perspective when they were speaking. Like there was one time that he was talking about like how he couldn't, how he had to like the dad had to like remove himself from the situation, like talking about the cochlear implants and like the necessity or lack thereof for like getting one, and the interpreter added in an entire like sentence that was basically like you know acting as if the dad was discounting the hearing perspective, and the dad never signed anything about that, and I was just like.
Yeah.
Like that's not what he said.
Yeah.
He wasn't saying that, you know what I mean? Like he wasn't like stupid hearing people, like like the interpreter made it seem like.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of interesting.
So that was kind of like a sign.
No, I think it was
you saying
important
that
to
just
like
reminded
mention.
me of you saying that because I wouldn't have realized that because I don't know.
I got really
myself,
bad
so.
at one point. I don't remember what it was, but I was like, that's not what he said. That's not what he said.
Yeah, I turned off my sound or the sound because I was like, the interpreting in general is just. I feel like it just wasn't necessary for me because I understood, but
Yeah.
I didn't really like it. And okay, so in what ways can you personally identify with Heather's parents? What similar or relatable experiences have you had or have you witnessed that allow you to sympathize with Heather's parents?
And Heather is the girl that wanted the cochlear implant.
She's the one with the two deaf parents. Yeah. I mean, I get it. Like on some level, like, can you imagine like growing up like where your family like is offering like the same cultural like perspective, and then suddenly your daughter kind of is like, I actually don't want to identify as this culture anymore. Like I kind of want to experience like an American, like a classically American, like American hearing experience, and like. I think especially when she's 5, it's hard for her to be able to articulate that she wouldn't want to like drop the deaf culture altogether, just that she wanted to like get another another experience, like be bicultural, and so it was like hard as her parents for them to like know that that's what she meant, so I could see it being scary and being like, so you're not gonna like want to associate with us anymore, like are you like, like I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I said that along the lines of deaf education and how I relate to them because I'm eventually going to have deaf students and I want them to feel empowered regardless if they can hear or if they're deaf. And so, their self-esteem is what matters, and just showing, already having a 5-year-old that's showing like self-esteem issues or questioning her identity, like that's already something that's hard to deal with. And so I can only imagine as a parent, but I know as a teacher, like that's gonna affect me, their self-esteem, my student, how they feel about their deafness. And so wanting to support that and show that there's nothing wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like talking about like something I can relate to. Made me think of, I know this like on a scale like does not compare, but just like with my little brother, like when he was deciding when to go to college, he said not Baylor, which is where I went, where my mom went, where all my family went. So like he did nothing. He wanted nothing to do with Baylor, and that was like it kind of felt like a personal rejection for us. It's like only imagine like the parents felt like she was rejecting the deaf culture, which that is such a bigger deal.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I think it's just like the fear of, like I can understand like the fear of losing her, losing that connection they have to her, because I think, I don't know, like when someone is like doing something new or like has something and like that's changing them, you always have that fear like in the back of your mind, like what if like they change completely and then they're not the same person that I've grown to like love and adore, you know?
Yeah.
And
no,
so
and no, just
yeah.
like why?
Yeah, you know, and so I think I can relate to that. Like I, you know, just even if it's just a little bit, because that's a whole different scale of things, because that's their whole like culture. But yeah, I could understand how that'd be super hard.
I kind of started thinking about it, and it kind of like reminds me of like if you like brought your child up in like a Christian home, and your child decided that they didn't want to be Christian, and like suddenly like yeah, like everything you thought your child's identity was is like, you know, like tipped upside down, you know, and how that could be really like challenging to like remain like close and like maintain like a really good relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In what ways can you personally identify with baby Peter's parents? What similar or relatable experiences have you had or have you witnessed that can allow you to empathize with Peter's parents? I mean, I think they just want, I mean, I could understand them wanting like the most for him and wanting him to have like all these opportunities. Like I could, yeah, I get that. And then I don't know, it just makes me wonder, well, I think it's hard to say what you would do if you're in those shoes, kind of how you were talking about earlier, like, you know, I'm not a parent, so I don't feel like I could totally quite understand, you know? So I could, yeah, so it's kind of hard for me to say.
I mean, I'm realistic in that there are limitations, you know, and whether that be in school or career-wise or whatever, like there are limitations. We all know that they can rise above them, but you just want like an easier life for your child, and so.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the mom saw her parents struggle in whatever way, with even if it was just with communication, like that's still a struggle. And you have to communicate with everyone. So.
Yeah, and like I also get it because, well, on some level I get it because if you think about it, like his twin brother was hearing, and if you really like want somebody to be able to identify with their twin and like maintain a close relationship, like I really understand that, and I understand like wanting your child to be able to fit in, like what we were talking about today, like you want your kid to have friends and you want them to be able to like connect with people, and so if that's like gonna be the easiest as, you know, a more like hearing centric view, like I could see where that would seem like the right thing to do, you know, or like the best thing to do. So I don't know, especially like when we watched that part of the video when like the father, like Heather's dad was like we saw him in the work setting, and him and his two coworkers were discussing something, and the one coworker was like, he doesn't know what he's doing, he's deaf, and it was like an aside, and I was literally blown away, like simply because he was deaf. He clearly didn't have any grasp of what they were trying to accomplish.
Yeah,
and
so
I think
in that sense you can kind of understand like why.
I could see like being a parent and being like, I don't want my kid to ever feel that way.
Yeah.
You know, and I could see where that would seem like the right thing to do.
Okay, so what was your impression of the professional shown in the film?
I feel like, sorry, go ahead.
No,
okay. I feel like it's hard to say because I feel like they made everything look a certain way. Like the audiologist, I felt like was very like pushing the hearing side of it. But then again, maybe they just didn't show her saying that it was an option for him to still be, you know, deaf and learn ASL and these things. But the way they portrayed her made it seem like she wasn't truly trying to give both sides of it, kind of how Dr. Drew has told us, like, you have to like just kind of show them their options and they decide. It, felt to me like she was more towards that perspective, but
Didn't this movie come out in the 90s?
Yeah, I wonder if it's a time difference.
That might be true.
Yeah, like, I'm sorry, like 20 years could have made a difference.
Yeah.
If this like came out middle 90s, like I could see how that could make a huge difference with the way we look at it, because like a lot of like the understanding for like the deaf community is just like starting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And even then,
I'm not
still so.
I'm super still like you should still give all the options, but I think that maybe that could have some.
It makes it make more sense.
Yeah. It was kind of interesting to see like the difference between like what we think of as right practice now versus like. Also, being an audiologist is more like classically associated with like a medical perspective, and so like there's automatically like a hearing loss, hearing impairment, like automatically associated with like something wrong with your kid,
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. What insight did this video give you into oral and manual communication methodology? Sorry, words. Okay.
I'm not sure if it was in the first or the second one, but the one where the speech pathologist like covered up her mouth with the screen. There was that one, and that was from class, so we saw that. And then the other one that was really interesting was when they played Simon Says, and the grandma / and then the therapist was there too, had them turn around and so that they could hear them, or check to see if they could hear them and if they were audible. So that was interesting.
Yeah. I don't think, not having known about that, I would have just either not noticed it or just been like, why are they doing that? So it's cool, it actually connects things that like I learned to what was actually going on.
I thought it was interesting that they only presented like a deaf school full ASL perspective and a auditory verbal perspective, and there was no option like a fully like hearing speech only auditory oral versus like ASL. There's like no auditory auditory verbal. There was no auditory oral, and there wasn't like any total communication options. And I don't like know if they like weren't interested or if they like straight didn't like know about the options. And I think that like could having been presented with that, do you think like the families might have like thought about something different and been less like at odds? I don't know.
Or maybe those options just aren't available because of like the location or the time
I don't know.
that this was,
But those are like questions that I had like after like going through this class that like came up that I was like, I wonder.
I think auditory oral would have been a good compromise. Or maybe even total communication, even though it's really hard, but
it would have like put everything, that they were concerned about and that both sides were wanting into one thing.
Yeah.
Even the clear preschool showed like the first part of the first video, like she's how are you today? Or something.
Yeah.
And those are all kids that have been all those are kids that have been implanted really early.
Young,
so
because they were just in kindergarten.
Yeah.
So they had to have been implanted like pretty much at the same time as learning speech, if not before.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such a conflict from everything else I learned.
Yeah,
it's such a conflict. So, what insight did the film give y'all into the deaf culture? Were you surprised by anything? I specifically thought it was interesting that there were so many deaf people in the family. And it was like on both sides, like the one grandparent / and then the other family And so, yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And deaf families are really rare. And so I would think they would be more in support of the deaf culture and building that up because they are so rare. So that was just like a shock to everything I've ever heard before.
I think the thing that like kind of took me back was when the deaf grandparents were taught like before the surgery, like right when the surgery was happening and before the surgery happened with the like baby Peter, I think it is, just talking about like how happy they were that he was deaf and just like even though I've learned a lot about this, like that would not be my first like reaction to it. And then even when like the surgery was happening, they were talking about how like how devastated they were that he was becoming like gonna hear. And then but then I understood it more when they were talking about like what if he thinks I don't know what she said, but what if he thinks that I'm like basically a weirdo and like I wouldn't have ever thought of that unless like I saw that,
Yeah.
And it makes sense because if you look at it from the other perspective, we have, the same feelings as that, but it just kind of blew my mind a little bit.
I mean, I also think she made, like, her concern makes sense to me because her own daughter, who's a coda, grew up, like, with them, like, was very rejecting of, like, not even just being, like, adamant about wanting her kid to have a CI, but she was straight, like, I saw you struggle and I don't ever want that for my kid. And you guys, like because of you, I had to grow up so fast. And it was very resentful.
Yeah.
It wasn't, like, respectful or understanding as much as, like, very resentful for the experience she had. Which makes, like, it easier to understand why she would want her kid to have a CI because of it. But I could definitely see as, like a future grandma being concerned that my relationship with my grandchild would be in jeopardy because of that. I also think, like, sorry, this might not have to do with the question, but I also like thinking about that, like that granddaughter or like the coda girl, Heather's aunt. What was her name?
You mean the one that's married to the hearing
the
brother?
the one with the twins, the mom of the twins.
Yeah.
Like was definitely like she was like, I want my child to be able to have anything he wants and like any experience he wants, and like all I could keep thinking was like, would that still be true if your kid decided he didn't want to wear a cochlear implant and wanted to be like culturally deaf? Mm-hmm. Like would that still be something you'd want him to be able to have? Mm-hmm. I don't know, like I think like everything is saying a lot, and that means like supporting your kid no matter what they feel like. So that was just something I thought.
Mm-hmm. What kind of emotional responses did you have to this program?
It's hard to see like the families are opposite each other. I think it did give me more of a understanding of the deaf culture side, because I really didn't know anything about deaf culture before Baylor. Just think that helps me understand their side better, but even like within a family there could be so much like tension and disagreement about it.
Yeah. It just broke my heart a lot. Yeah. Like I think at one point, like Lori and I were watching it together. So at one point, Lori and I looked at each other, and Lori said what I've been thinking for a long time, which is that here these family members are, and here's Heather, like in the background, sitting and watching them fight. And I was like, oh my god, I don't know. Like I think that would be really hard, just even like from her perspective, like understanding like how much this was like ripping her family apart,
Yeah, I just wanted to know what like she was thinking this whole time, because like it's affecting her, and like you don't really know in what ways, and sometimes you don't understand in what ways because you're a child.
But it happened. You could see that she was like really concerned though.
Yeah.
Like if you watched her instead of watching the family, she wasn't like ignorant. I mean, she was like very.
Because even if you're not understanding like all that's being communicated or said, because there's some there was a lot of signing, but there was also like yelling at each other and stuff. But you can feel that tension and feel that something's like tearing your family apart basically. And yeah, I think that part was like what broke my heart the most, just like seeing her, but yeah, just very extreme and lots of emotions. And
they also just said a lot of really hurtful stuff to each other. Like I wrote down a couple things that like kind of like shocked me. But like, like when like Grandpa Pete, because there's like there's like three Peters, right? Grandpa Peter and the father of Peter, were fighting. The grandfather was saying how he like had trusted like his son so much, like about like doing the right thing for Heather, and but that was like broken now that he wasn't gonna get Heather a cochlear implant, and like he wanted his like granddaughter to be able to have a cure, and that like what would you do if like it's like not healing a cripple, like that's what he compared it to, like having a crippled child. And I was just like, I think that that's really hard because then he's saying his son's a cripple, and I thought that was really intense because you're not just rejecting like your granddaughter, but you're rejecting like your son's whole like life and perspective, and I thought that was like, really intense.
Yeah, I think that was part of the reason it's so hard because I don't think they always fully realized how hurtful what they were saying. Like they just wanted to get their point across, and they didn't really think about what they were saying and the implements of that. Like what you were saying that he was saying that his son was a cripple by saying that. So I think that made it frustrating as well.
I felt like the worst for Nita, which was the deaf mom, because she was like in the middle, like she wanted to sympathize with her daughter and be there for her daughter, which I thought was amazing. And then, but she's also deaf and she wanted to side with her husband as well, and so she was like literally in the middle. And when they were reading the book to the hearing family, I was like, this is not cool. This movie isn't cool anymore.
Yeah.
And the little girl was like, I don't want to sign.
Yeah. Well,
just getting pushed in so many directions, like her mom's like, it's okay, and her dad's like, no, use your language, like you need to use your language. Yeah.
Well, and then when like the hearing parents were like basically telling them that they wouldn't be doing the right thing unless they gave their child the same thing that the like hearing family had done, which is like implant her, and then also like seeing the girl with the cochlear implants reaction to like Heather trying to talk, and I was just like, that was really hurtful too, because you could she was like, this girl is so weird.
Yeah.